History is missing entire chapters of its own genius. Ancient civilizations created inventions that rival our modern world, from materials that repaired themselves to devices that captured electricity. But these breakthroughs were systematically erased by conquest. This video uncovers 22 of these lost marvels, revealing how empires burned libraries, silenced artisans, and dismantled knowledge to secure their power. By the end, you will understand how the deliberate suppression of ideas set back human progress by centuries and reshaped the very trajectory of our species. What if the Roman Empire had not vanished a self-healing concrete that could revolutionize our cities today? How different would medicine be if advanced surgical tools from ancient India had not been destroyed? The answers lie in the ashes of forgotten libraries and the fragments left behind. What do you believe is the greatest cost when a culture's knowledge is erased? Conquest carves its victory not only in borders but in the very stories we tell. It is a silent war against memory, where the victor's narrative becomes the only truth. When a powerful empire marches into a new land, its soldiers do not just seize gold and territory. They target the foundations of a culture's identity, its libraries and schools, its artists and engineers. This systematic dismantling of knowledge, a form of cultural Chinese letter, ensures that no competing idea can rise to challenge the new rulers. The legendary burning of the Library of Alexandria was not a singular act of chaos. It was a calculated move in a pattern repeated for thousands of years, from the Mongols erasing entire cities to Spanish conquistadors melting intricate artifacts into simple bars of gold. By silencing the artisans and burning the books that held their secrets, conquerors effectively reset the clock of progress, making their own power appear absolute and inevitable. This is why so many brilliant innovations simply vanished, leaving behind only cryptic references and frustrating gaps in our historical record. And so we begin our journey into the shadows of the forgotten, with a discovery so advanced it seems to defy the very age it came from, a material that could repair its own wounds. The secret to Rome's eternal structures was not just in their grand designs, but in the very breadth of their materials. Walk along an ancient aqueduct today, and you might find it standing strong long after modern counterparts have crumbled. This was no accident. Roman concrete possessed a remarkable ability to heal itself. When tiny cracks formed from earthquakes or the relentless wear of weather, this special concrete would not simply weaken. Instead, it would activate its own repair system. The key was a mysterious ingredient modern builders had overlooked for centuries: lime clasts. These small, white lumps of quicklime were once thought to be a sign of poor mixing, a primitive mistake. We now know they were the genius of the recipe. When water seeps into a crack, it reacts with these lime clasts, sparking a chemical process that creates new crystals. These crystals grow, filling the fracture from the inside out, effectively stitching the wound closed. It is a technology we are desperately trying to replicate today. The Roman architect Vitruvius wrote about the precise mixtures and methods, knowledge that was as practical as it was profound. But with the slow collapse of the empire, the intricate system of training and construction that produced this wonder concrete also fell apart. The medieval builders who followed simply did not have the resources or the preserved knowledge to continue the practice. They used what they could find, and the self-healing secret was buried for over a millennium. Modern experts like Dr. Marie Jackson point out that this ancient material is not only more durable than our common Portland cement, but its production was far less damaging to the environment. Rediscovering it could mean building roads that last for thousands of years, not just decades, and creating infrastructure that maintains itself. This loss represents more than a forgotten formula. It is a stark lesson in how the collapse of a civilization can sever a lifeline of practical knowledge, setting back progress for generations. From a material that heals stone, we turn to a tool that healed the human body, a medical instrument so precise its purpose was forgotten for centuries. While Roman concrete mended stone, ancient Indian surgeons perfected the art of mending the human body. In the vibrant intellectual centers like Takshashila, medicine reached a level of sophistication that would not be seen again in Europe for over 1,000 years. The surgeon Sushruta, working around 600 BCE, authored a text that detailed procedures we would consider remarkably advanced. He described how to remove cataracts, reconstruct noses, and even perform early forms of plastic surgery. His toolkit was not one of crude implements, but of over 120 finely crafted instruments. These were not simple knives, they were specialized tools, each designed for a specific task. There were scalpels with blades so sharp they could make precise incisions, forceps for grasping delicate tissues, and needles for intricate stitching. The metal itself was a marvel, a form of tempered steel that resisted corrosion and held a fine edge. Perhaps most astounding was their understanding of infection. These tools were not just cleaned, they were sterilized using steam and powerful herbal antiseptics, a practice that would not become standard in the West until the 19th century. This entire ecosystem of knowledge, however, was fragile. When waves of conquest swept through the region, these great universities and their libraries became targets. The transfer of knowledge was violently interrupted. Manuscripts were lost, artisans who crafted the tools were dispersed or silenced, and the intricate training of new surgeons was broken. For centuries, this advanced medical wisdom was suppressed, forgotten, or dismissed in the West as myth. It was only through later translations that European doctors rediscovered these ancient texts, often with a sense of shock at what had been achieved so long ago. Modern surgeons have since validated many of Sushruta's techniques, marveling at their minimal invasiveness and deep understanding of human anatomy. The loss of these tools was not merely a historical footnote. It had a profound human cost, delaying the development of safe, effective surgery for countless generations. This pattern of erasure extends beyond medicine into the very energy that powered a civilization. While surgeons perfected their art in India, a different kind of power was being harnessed in the workshops of ancient Mesopotamia. A simple clay pot, no larger than a hand, held a secret that would challenge our entire timeline of electrical discovery. Inside this unassuming jar, archaeologists found a copper cylinder and an iron rod, carefully sealed with an asphalt stopper. When filled with a common acidic substance like vinegar or grape juice, this assembly becomes a functional battery, capable of generating a small but consistent electric current. The object, known today as the Baghdad Battery, suggests that someone over 2,000 years ago understood the principles of electrochemistry. What could they have used this subtle power for? The leading theory, proposed by experts like Wilhelm Koenig, points to electroplating. Imagine an artisan in a dusty workshop, using the battery's gentle current to deposit a thin, shimmering layer of gold onto a silver statue or a piece of jewelry. This would have been a form of magic, transforming the appearance and value of an object without the need for excessive hammering or heat. Replicas built to the exact specifications of the find confirm it is more than a theoretical curiosity. It is a viable power source. Yet, with the successive falls of the Parthian and Sasanian empires, this nascent technology flickered and died. The new ruling powers that swept through the region had different cultural and scientific priorities. The knowledge of how to create and use these cells was not systematically suppressed with violence, but simply neglected, fading from memory as a useless curiosity. Its rediscovery in the modern era forces us to ask a profound question. If such a fundamental discovery could be lost so easily, what other forms of energy might ancient cultures have toyed with? This thought naturally draws our gaze toward the Great Pyramids, whose very construction seems to defy the tools of their time, and to the strange, wireless lamps described in some Egyptian reliefs. Could the spark from a clay jar in Baghdad have been part of a much wider, and now lost, understanding of the world's invisible forces? Deep within the stone walls of the Hathor Temple at Dendera, a strange and mesmerizing image challenges our understanding of ancient Egypt. Etched into a sacred chamber is a relief showing what looks unmistakably like a giant, elongated light bulb. Inside this bulb writhes a snake in the shape of a filament, connected by a thick cable to a box that is held steady by a priest. To the modern eye, it is an electrical diagram carved in stone. Mainstream Egyptology interprets this as a symbolic representation of a lotus flower birthing a snake, a story of creation and divine power. Yet when engineers like Erich von Däniken looked at the same carving, they saw the principles of a Crookes tube, a type of early electrical device that produces a glow when voltage is applied. The components are all there: the bulb, the filament, the power source, and the operator. Could this have been a form of arc lighting, powered by primitive batteries like the one found in Baghdad, or even by harnessing static electricity from the dry desert air? The knowledge required to build and maintain such a device would have been the exclusive domain of the temple priests, a sacred science intertwined with their religion. This made it profoundly vulnerable. As pharaonic Egypt declined, first under Roman rule and later with the spread of new faiths, these native religious and scientific practices were systematically suppressed. The temples lost their power, their funding, and their scribes. The intricate, hands-on knowledge of how to create the temple's miracles, whether symbolic or real, faded into obscurity. If this was indeed a form of lost illumination, it means ancient innovation stretched into the realm of energy and light, a field we thought was exclusively modern. The potential loss is staggering, not just for what it tells us about the past, but for the centuries of darkness that might have been avoided. This exploration of unseen energy leads us to another powerful, invisible force that some believe could literally move mountains: the science of acoustic levitation. The deep hum of a sacred chant might have done more than elevate the spirit. It could have lifted stone. Ancient chronicles from Tibet describe monks using massive drums and trumpets to generate a specific sonic frequency, a resonance that allowed them to float heavy blocks up a mountainside to build remote monasteries. Similar stories from Egypt suggest priests used synchronized vocal tones to guide colossal obelisks into place. For a long time, these accounts were dismissed as pure folklore, but modern physics has begun to catch up with the legend. Scientists like Dr. Vladimir Gavro discovered that high-intensity, low-frequency sound waves can indeed create a standing wave, a precise pattern where the force of the sound cancels out the pull of gravity. In laboratory experiments, they have used this principle to levitate small droplets of water, beads of plastic, and even tiny insects. The idea that an advanced civilization could scale this effect is not as far-fetched as it seems. If a culture mastered the mathematics of resonance, they could theoretically design platforms and sound emitters that would make a multi-ton block virtually weightless, allowing a small team to position it with astonishing precision. This would elegantly explain some of history's most stubborn mysteries, like the perfect fitting of stones at Machu Picchu or the transportation of the massive trilithons at Stonehenge. This knowledge, however, was not written in common textbooks. It was an esoteric science likely guarded by priestly classes within temple schools. When those temples were razed by invading armies, the sonic secrets died with the last initiates who understood the sacred frequencies. The conquering cultures had their own building methods and no use for what they saw as pagan magic. Today, we are painstakingly reinventing this field, with researchers using acoustic levitation to handle delicate materials in labs and even to perform non-invasive surgery inside the human body. The loss of this sonic science set back our understanding of vibration and matter by over 1,000 years. Just as sound could manipulate solid stone, another civilization perfected a material that defied the very nature of solidity itself, creating a glass that could bend and bounce instead of shatter. A material that bends instead of breaks sounds like a fantasy from the future, yet Roman historians recorded its brief and tragic existence. The writer Petronius recounts a master glassmaker who arrived at the court of Emperor Tiberius with a humble offering, a drinking bowl. To demonstrate its wonder, the artisan threw the vessel onto the stone floor. Instead of shattering into 1,000 pieces, it merely dented. With a few taps from a small hammer, he restored the bowl to its original shape. This was vitrum flexile, flexible glass. Pliny the Elder also noted the invention, confirming the story was more than mere rumor. The emperor, however, did not react with wonder or reward. Tiberius was gripped by a cold fear. He asked the inventor if anyone else knew the secret of this unbreakable glass. Upon hearing that the knowledge was his alone, the emperor ordered the man executed and his workshop utterly demolished. The reasoning was brutally pragmatic. If a substance as durable as metal, yet as clear as glass, became common, it would completely undermine the value of the imperial treasuries, gold and silver. An innovation that could have safeguarded countless lives and belongings was a race to protect the wealth of the powerful. Modern science has only recently caught up to this lost idea with the development of metallic glasses and polymer composites, materials that share that same remarkable ability to absorb impact without fracturing. The loss set back the entire field of material science. Imagine Roman aqueducts covered with flexible, weatherproof panes or soldiers wearing transparent, shatter-proof visors. The potential applications for architecture, transportation, and daily life are endless. This pattern of suppression for economic reasons is a dark thread running through history, where progress is sacrificed for the stability of the ruling class. From this deliberate destruction of a material marvel, we journey to a different kind of loss, one not forged in a workshop but cultivated in the earth, where an entire agricultural system was wiped from memory. The deliberate destruction of flexible glass to protect an emperor's wealth reveals a grim truth that progress is often sacrificed for power. But this suppression was not limited to royal workshops or precious materials. Entire landscapes of innovation were erased, along with the food security they provided for millions. In the heart of what is now Mexico City, the Aztecs did not just farm the land, they engineered it from the water up. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, was a marvel of urban planning built on an island, and its lifeblood was the Chinampa. These were not merely floating gardens, but intricate artificial islands constructed in the shallow marshes of Lake Texcoco. Builders wove giant reed mats, layered them with rich mud from the lake bottom, and anchored them with native willow trees whose roots would bind the entire structure together. The result was a grid of incredibly fertile plots separated by canals. This was not simple farming, it was a closed-loop ecosystem. The canal water provided constant irrigation, while the aquatic plants and nutrient-rich muck dredged from the canals served as a perpetual, natural fertilizer. This system allowed for astonishingly efficient crop rotation. yielding up to 7 harvests in a single year and sustaining an urban population that may have numbered over 200,000 people. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived, they saw a city that rivaled any in Europe, yet they viewed the Chinampas as a primitive oddity. Driven by a desire for dry land and European-style agriculture, they systematically drained the vast lake system. The conquistadors could not see the genius in working with the swamp, so they replaced it with their own methods, which were ill-suited to the local environment. The consequence was catastrophic. Without the Chinampas' natural irrigation and fertilization, the soil quickly degraded. Famine followed, crippling the once abundant society. Today, modern permaculture experts look back at the few remaining Chinampas with a sense of awe and profound loss. They see a blueprint for sustainable, high-yield agriculture that requires no synthetic chemicals and nurtures the land instead of depleting it. The destruction of this system is a stark reminder that the greatest inventions are not always made of metal or glass. Sometimes, the most advanced technology is a deep, symbiotic understanding of how to live within nature's rhythms. From this lost harmony with the earth, we set our sights on the open seas, where another civilization developed a tool that could have rewritten the entire age of exploration, a navigational device of unparalleled accuracy. The open sea was a terrifying expanse for ancient sailors, a place where one wrong turn meant being lost forever. Yet a corroded lump of bronze and wood, salvaged from a 2,000-year-old shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera, reveals they may have had a celestial guide far beyond the stars. When researchers finally peered inside its calcified shell, they found a breathtakingly complex system of interlocking bronze gears, some with precisely cut teeth numbering in the dozens. This was not a simple calendar, it was a mechanical universe in a box. By turning a hand crank, an operator could predict the movements of the sun and moon, forecast lunar and solar eclipses, and even track the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. It was, in essence, an analog computer from 200 years before the Common Era. Historian Derek J. de Solla Price spent decades unraveling its secrets, concluding it represented a level of mechanical engineering that should not have existed for another 1,000 years. This single device implies it was not a miraculous outlier, but part of a thriving tradition of Greek craftsmanship, a school of thought that built intricate models of the cosmos. Such a mechanism would have been a navigator's most prized possession. Instead of relying solely on the vague positions of constellations, a captain could use this device to know his exact longitude by calculating lunar positions, a method not rediscovered until the 18th century. The knowledge required to create the Antikythera Mechanism, however, was concentrated in the great learning centers of ancient Greece. As Rome expanded its empire, it absorbed Greek territories not as intellectual partners to be nurtured, but as conquered provinces to be plundered. The Roman war machine valued practical engineering for its aqueducts and roads, but had little use for the abstract, philosophical gadgetry of a subdued culture. The workshops that produced these cosmic calculators were likely dismantled, their artisans conscripted or scattered, their delicate knowledge deemed irrelevant to the New World Order. This was not a violent burning of a library, but a slow, silent death of a craft. Without a continuous line of masters teaching apprentices, the art of building such precision instruments simply faded from memory. Its rediscovery forces a humbling realization that our own scientific revolution was in many ways a rediscovery of principles the ancients had already mastered and then lost. The loss of such a precise instrument set back the entire course of navigation and astronomy, delaying our ability to confidently map the world. Yet, even as this mechanical marvel was sinking to the seafloor, another civilization had already perfected a form of medicine that could render the surgeon's blade virtually painless. The agony of the surgeon's knife was not an inevitable part of ancient medicine. In the turbulent era of the Three Kingdoms, the legendary Chinese physician Huo Chuo performed a medical miracle, conducting complex abdominal surgeries while his patients lay in a deep, painless sleep. His secret was a potent powder known as Ma Fei San, a general anesthetic he administered with wine to render a person completely unconscious. Historical records describe him opening bodies to remove diseased tissue, suturing intestines, and even performing procedures on bones and joints, all while the patient felt nothing. This was not mere sedation, it was a complete suspension of sensation, a concept that would not become standard practice in the West for another 1700 years. Huo Chuo's knowledge, however, died with him. Fearing the surgeon's growing fame, the warlord Cao Cao imprisoned and executed him. In the political purges and library burnings that marked the fall of the Han dynasty, Huo Chuo's own written works were deliberately destroyed. Later physicians had only fragments and legends to work from, forced to rely on less effective pain management like acupuncture or alcohol. Modern pharmacologists theorize that Ma Fei San likely contained a dangerous but effective cocktail of herbs, including cannabis for its numbing properties and aconite, a powerful neurotoxin that in precise doses could induce a coma-like state. The precise recipe, its dosages, and its antidotes are gone forever. The human cost of this single loss is almost beyond calculation, condemning millions across the globe to centuries of unimaginable surgical suffering. It is a stark example of how political conquest and instability can erase not just artifacts, but compassion itself. While one empire lost the ability to silence pain, another built a network that could silence distance, creating a communication system that moved at the speed of light. The intricate knots of a quipu held more than just string, they contained the entire voice of an empire. Across the vast expanse of the Andes, the Inca governed a territory larger than the Roman Empire without a traditional written script. Their tool was the quipu, a complex device of colored cords hanging from a primary string. Each knot was not a simple tally. Its position, the type of knot, and the color of the cord all conveyed specific information. This was a sophisticated, three-dimensional language of data. A single quipu could record census data, track agricultural yields across thousands of terraces, and even encode historical narratives and poetry. Researchers like Sabine Heil have discovered that the very fiber of the strings, whether from llama or alpaca wool, and the direction of the twist, could signify different ethnic groups or social statuses. It was a binary-like code crafted from physical materials, a system for running a complex state with breathtaking efficiency. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in Peru, they saw these intricate objects not as administrative tools, but as idols of a pagan faith. In their campaign to convert the Inca and dismantle their power structure, they systematically gathered and burned countless quipus. The Spanish could not read them, and what they could not understand, they feared. This act of cultural obliteration severed a unique lineage of information science. Only a few hundred quipus survived the flames, and modern scholars are still racing to unlock their full meaning. The loss is profound. This was a form of data storage and communication that evolved entirely outside the tradition of ink and parchment. If this knowledge had been preserved, it could have offered an entirely different model for early computing, proving that the path to information technology is not a single road but many. The destruction of the Quipu system shows that conquest targets not just people, but the very structures of thought they create. From a system that managed an empire with strings, we turn to a weapon that could have shattered empires with fire. Fire could become a loyal soldier, one that obeyed commands and refused to be extinguished. For the Byzantine Empire, this was not a fantasy but a foundational weapon. Greek fire was the ancient world's ultimate naval deterrent, a liquid flame that clung to the wooden hulls of enemy ships and burned fiercely even on the surface of the sea. Projected through bronze tubes mounted on their warships, this terrifying substance created a hellish spectacle, turning the water itself into an ally against invaders. The secret of its composition was guarded with a paranoia worthy of a modern spy thriller. Only a single family, tradition says, knew the full recipe, and they were forbidden from ever sharing it outside the empire. This secrecy was their salvation, allowing Constantinople to repel multiple Arab sieges that should have overwhelmed its walls. The formula likely involved a volatile mixture of crude petroleum drawn from natural surface wells, combined with quicklime which ignites upon contact with water, and perhaps other resins or chemicals that gave it its sticky, persistent quality. Modern chemists and historians have tried for centuries to perfectly replicate it, but every attempt falls short. The precise alchemy that made it so effective died with the last Byzantine chemists when the Ottoman cannons finally breached the city's walls in 1453. The conquerors were focused on building their own new empire, and this defensive technology, so vital to the old regime, was simply not a priority to preserve. The loss of Greek fire is a paradox of progress. It represents a pinnacle of chemical engineering, a tool that pushed the boundaries of what was possible, yet its purpose was purely destructive. Its disappearance forces us to confront a difficult question: is knowledge worth preserving even when its primary application is war? This dark, lost flame kept an empire safe for centuries, but its secret perished in the very fires of conquest it was designed to fight. From a weapon that mastered fire on the water, we shift to a structure that mastered the water itself for the health of its people. While empires mastered the art of war, the cities of the Indus Valley were quietly perfecting the science of life. In the meticulously planned streets of Mohenjo-Daro, the greatest luxury was not gold, but something far more vital: reliably clean water. This civilization, flourishing over 4,000 years ago, built a public health infrastructure that would not be matched for millennia. Archaeologists excavating the ruins have uncovered something astounding: dedicated water filtration rooms within individual homes. These were not simple pits. They were sophisticated tanks constructed with a layered system. At the bottom was a bed of coarse gravel to catch large debris. Above that sat a finer layer of sand, which would trap smaller sediment and organic matter. And at the very top, they used a secret weapon: crushed charcoal. This carbon-rich layer was the true genius of the design, acting as a chemical sponge to pull toxins and bad tastes from the water, a principle identical to the filters we use in our own homes today. Residue analysis from these ancient tanks confirms they were remarkably effective at removing impurities, providing a safe, potable supply that flowed through the city's advanced covered drainage system. This was a society that understood the direct link between clean water and public health on a civic scale. Yet this knowledge did not survive, as the Indus Valley civilization declined, likely due to a shifting river system and the arrival of new peoples. Their urban centers were gradually abandoned. The new settlers were pastoralists and farmers, their way of life fundamentally different from the complex, centralized urban planning of the Indus people. They had no need for, and no understanding of, the intricate hydraulic engineering buried beneath the ruins. The concept of municipal water treatment simply vanished. The consequence of this loss echoed for centuries. Societies that followed, from the Vedic kingdoms to the empires of the classical age, struggled terribly with waterborne diseases like cholera and dysentery, plagues that could have been drastically mitigated with this forgotten technology. It was not until the 19th century, with the rise of modern germ theory, that Western engineers formally rediscovered the purifying power of sand and charcoal, believing they had invented something new. The loss of this life-saving system is a sobering reminder that the most profound inventions are often those that protect us from invisible threats. From a material that purified water for the body, we turn to a material that seemed to purify light for the soul. A Damascus steel blade was more than a weapon. It was a shimmering ribbon of liquid stone, forged from a unique type of high-carbon steel ingot known as woots, which originated in southern India. These swords possessed an almost mythical reputation. Their surfaces flowed with mesmerizing, watery patterns, a direct result of the internal crystalline structure of the metal. But this beauty was not merely decorative. It was the visible signature of a blade that could slice through a silk scarf falling through the air and yet remain sharp enough to hack through an opponent's armor without chipping. The secret lay in a lost alchemy of metallurgy. Indian smiths would take the raw woot steel, itself a product of a sophisticated crucible process that trapped carbon nanotubes within the iron, and subject it to a precise cycle of heating and hammering. This painstaking method, passed down from master to apprentice, controlled the formation of ultra-hard cementite carbides within a softer, more flexible steel matrix. The result was a material that combined incredible sharpness with a toughness that modern steel often struggles to match. This knowledge was not confined to a single forge. It thrived along bustling trade routes, from the workshops of India to the arms bazaars of Damascus. But this interconnected network became its greatest vulnerability. When the Mongol Empire swept through the Middle East in the 13th century, they did not just sack cities, they systematically dismantled the centers of production. Skilled smiths were killed or scattered, and the delicate chain of apprenticeship was shattered. The trade routes that supplied the raw woot steel from India were severed. By the 18th century, the last smiths who understood the full art had died, taking the precise temperatures, cooling rates, and hammering techniques with them. Modern metallurgists, using electron microscopes, have only recently begun to decode the nanoscale structures that gave the steel its legendary properties. The loss of Damascus steel set back the entire field of advanced alloy development for centuries. It stands as a stark testament to how a technology, no matter how advanced, is fragile when its supporting web of knowledge and trade is torn apart by conflict. This earthly mastery of metal finds its echo in the stars, where another civilization built a device to track the cosmos itself. The Nebra Sky Disk was a universe held in one hand. Unearthed in Germany, this bronze circle from 1600 BCE is inlaid with gold symbols that are not random decorations. They form a precise map of the night sky, with a cluster of stars we recognize as the Pleiades, a crescent moon, and a full sun. It is the oldest known portable star map, a sophisticated astronomical instrument crafted over a millennium before the fall of Troy. For the Bronze Age people who created it, this disk was more than a calendar. It was a sacred interface between their world and the cosmos. Priests would have used it to determine the optimal times for planting and harvest by tracking the complex dance of the sun and moon. Researchers have confirmed its accuracy in marking solstices, allowing this ancient culture to synchronize their lives with celestial cycles. But this knowledge was not preserved in great libraries. It was an oral tradition passed down through generations of a specific priesthood, and its physical form was this single, vulnerable object. When waves of Celtic and later Roman conquest swept through Central Europe, they brought their own gods, their own calendars, and their own cosmological truths. The old ways were systematically suppressed, the native priests displaced, and their sacred artifacts like the sky disk were buried, either for safekeeping or as spoils of war. The disk survived only because it was hidden away, a lone relic of a complete system of understanding that was erased. Its isolation is what makes it so haunting. It hints at a continent of lost knowledge, of other disks and other star charts that were melted down for their raw materials or left to corrode in the soil. This single survivor suggests that early Europeans possessed an astronomical sophistication we never credited them with, a wisdom that was paved over by the roads and temples of conquering empires. From a civilization that mapped the heavens to guide its people, we turn to a city that engineered the earth itself to protect them. The ruins of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa reveal a city planner's dream, laid out with a ruler's precision over 4,000 years ago. Unlike the tangled, organic growth of medieval towns, these Indus Valley metropolises were built on a strict grid of wide, straight streets that divided the city into neat city blocks. Every brick, from the grand public structures to the humblest home, conformed to a standardized ratio, a uniformity that speaks of a powerful, centralized authority with a clear vision for order. This was not just about aesthetics, it was about function. Beneath those orderly streets ran the civilization's true marvel, a network of covered drains and clay pipes that channeled waste away from homes and into the surrounding rivers. Each house had its own bathroom and a chute connecting to this main sewer, a level of public sanitation that would be unimaginable in Europe for another 3,000 years. At the heart of it all stood the Great Bath, a massive, watertight public pool that likely served a ritual purpose, demonstrating a society that valued communal hygiene and civic space. This entire system of urban intelligence, however, was not maintained. As the climate grew more arid and the life-giving rivers shifted their courses, the civilization's agricultural base weakened. This made them vulnerable to the influx of new peoples, the Aryans, whose pastoral culture did not include the blueprint for running a massive, planned city. The knowledge of how to survey a perfect grid, how to manufacture bricks to a universal standard, and how to engineer a city-wide drainage system simply faded away. The new settlements that rose in the region were chaotic by comparison, growing slowly and without a master plan. The consequence was more than just visual clutter, it was a regression in public health and administrative efficiency. Modern urban planners look at the Indus Valley blueprints with a sense of awe, seeing in them solutions to problems we still grapple with today, from traffic flow to waste management. The loss of this systematic approach set back the development of the efficient, livable metropolis by millennia, a silent cost of a civilization's quiet collapse. Just as this society mastered the organization of urban space, another ancient culture perfected the very fabric that clothed its people, creating a textile technology that defied natural limitations. The golden thread of the noble pen shell was spun from the sea itself. Along the sun-drenched coasts of the ancient Mediterranean, Phoenician artisans performed a miracle of transformation. They did not shear sheep or cultivate cotton. Instead, they dove for a specific large clam, the Pinna nobilis. From its byssus, the very filaments the mollusk uses to anchor itself to the seafloor, they harvested a material of astonishing properties. These fine, wiry strands, after a secret process of cleaning and spinning, became sea silk. The resulting cloth was a marvel, shimmering with a natural, golden hue as if woven from captured sunlight. It was incredibly lightweight, yet stronger than regular silk, and possessed a natural resistance to flame, a quality that must have seemed magical. Garments woven from sea silk were among the most precious commodities in the ancient world, worn by priests and royalty as a symbol of both wealth and a deep, symbiotic connection to the ocean. This was not a large-scale industry, but a niche artisanal craft, its secrets passed from parent to child in isolated coastal communities. Its survival depended entirely on a stable, continuous culture. But the Mediterranean was a sea of rising and falling empires. As the Roman war machine consolidated power, and later as Islamic caliphates redirected ancient trade routes, the economic and cultural landscape shifted dramatically. The specific ports and communities that sustained the sea silk trade were marginalized or absorbed. The knowledge holders, the divers who knew the exact time to harvest the byssus without killing the creature, and the spinners who understood the delicate technique, simply faded from the scene. Their specialized skill had no place in the new bulk trade economy. Today, this ancient art teeters on the brink of extinction, preserved by perhaps one or two elderly weavers on the island of Sardinia. The loss of sea silk is a quiet tragedy of globalization, a reminder that progress often steamrolls over delicate, irreplaceable traditions that represent a unique harmony between human culture and the natural world. Just as this rare textile nourished the body with its beauty, another lost innovation nourished the body from within, a culinary staple that doubled as a powerful medicine. The mastery of fermentation was a quiet revolution in the ancient kitchen. Across the farms of Korea and China, preserving the cabbage harvest was not merely a matter of survival, but a deliberate cultivation of health. Cooks discovered that by burying vegetables in earthenware jars with salt and spices, they could create an environment where beneficial bacteria thrived. The resulting kimchi and complex soy pastes like jang were more than just flavorful staples, they were potent sources of probiotics. These living foods aided digestion and fortified the immune system, a connection between gut health and overall wellness that modern science has only recently begun to fully map and validate. Ancient medical texts such as the Chinese Compendium of Materia Medica did not just list these foods, they detailed their specific therapeutic uses, prescribing different ferments for different ailments. This was a sophisticated, empirical understanding of microbiology, practiced for centuries without ever seeing the tiny organisms at work. The fragility of this knowledge, however, lay in its domestic nature. It was a science passed from mother to daughter, from village elder to apprentice, dependent on cultural stability. When the Mongol invasions swept through Asia and later during the upheavals of colonial rule, these rhythms were violently disrupted. Populations were displaced, croplands were destroyed, and the continuous line of oral tradition was broken. In the ensuing chaos, many of the more intricate, multi-stage fermentation processes were lost or drastically simplified, reducing the diversity of microbial strains and with it the full health efficacy of the food. Conquering empires often dismissed these local practices as peasant superstition, imposing their own dietary customs and ignoring the hidden wisdom in the clay pots. Today, as researchers race to document the remaining traditional recipes, they find a stunning variety of microbes that have all but disappeared from our modern, sterilized diets. The loss of this ancient probiotic wisdom is a profound reminder that conquest reshapes our internal worlds as much as our external ones, altering the very microorganisms that call our bodies home. From this invisible world within our gut, we turn to an abstract world of numbers, where a mathematical concept offered a stunning shortcut through complex calculations. A number can be a revolutionary idea. While medieval European scholars struggled with cumbersome Roman numerals, the Maya had already mapped the heavens with a mathematical system of breathtaking elegance. Theirs was a base 20 or videsimal framework perfectly suited to their astronomical observations. It used just 3 symbols, a dot for 1, a bar for 5, and a shell for 0. This last symbol, the shell, was their true masterstroke. It was not merely a placeholder, but a number in its own right, representing the concept of nothingness and completion. With this symbol, they could perform complex calculations for their long-count calendar, tracking planetary cycles over millions of days with an accuracy that would not be matched for over 1,000 years. This mathematical language was the engine of their civilization, predicting seasons, guiding rituals, and ordering their entire cosmos. The Spanish conquistadors who arrived in the 16th century saw this not as genius but as heresy. In their zeal to convert the Maya and dismantle their culture, they systematically gathered and burned the bark paper codices that held this knowledge. The Franciscan Bishop Diego de Landa famously oversaw a massive auto da fe in 1562, destroying countless texts and with them the intricate keys to Mayan mathematics. The European numeral system was imposed, and the indigenous intellectual tradition was violently suppressed. As mathematician Dr. Michael Coe has argued, this single act of cultural destruction had a profound ripple effect. The concept of zero, which the Maya had so elegantly mastered, is the bedrock of higher mathematics, essential for the development of calculus, physics, and engineering. Its suppression in the Americas, while it was still being fiercely debated in Europe, delayed a global mathematical consensus. The loss of the Mayan system is a stark lesson in how the destruction of one culture's intellectual framework can slow the progress of all humanity. From this abstract world of numbers, we turn to a very concrete tool, one that could sense the hidden wealth of the earth itself. The ability to sense what lies hidden beneath the earth was once a respected art. Long before modern drilling rigs and electromagnetic sensors, practitioners across ancient Egypt and China used simple forked rods or swinging pendulums to locate water and precious minerals. This practice, known today as dowsing, is often written off as mere superstition, but its persistence across millennia and continents suggests a more nuanced truth. It was a key element of geomancy, a tradition of reading the subtle energies of the landscape. These ancient experts were not relying on magic wands, but on a honed sensitivity. They would have combined deep observation of the terrain, the types of vegetation that grew in certain areas, and even the behavior of animals with a cultivated intuition for the land's hidden veins. The rods or pendulums may have simply amplified subconscious, almost imperceptible physical reactions to underground water or mineral deposits, making the invisible visible. This was a sophisticated method of perception, a way of knowing the earth that was passed down through generations. When new empires rose with their own rigid, empirical ideologies, these subtle, experience-based skills were dismissed as primitive folklore. The conqueror's methods were systematic and repeatable in a laboratory, while the dowser's craft was personal and contextual, rooted in a specific place and culture. Ethnographers have recorded numerous instances where traditional dowsers, using nothing but a pair of bent wires, have pinpointed water sources with astonishing accuracy where modern surveys had failed, proving that a real, practical skill was at work. The loss here is not of a physical object, but of an entire way of interacting with the natural world, a deep literacy of the land that was systematically marginalized and forgotten. It stands as a powerful reminder that some of the most profound inventions are not tools you can hold in your hand, but methods of perception that allow you to see what others cannot. This sensitivity to the Earth's hidden forces finds a parallel in an architectural genius that allowed entire cities to dance with the planet's tremors. The stones of Machu Picchu are not merely stacked, they are woven together. The Inca understood something fundamental that modern engineers are only now relearning, that a rigid structure will shatter under stress, while a flexible one will dance and survive. Their secret was ashlar masonry, a construction technique of almost impossible precision. Each granite block was painstakingly shaped to interlock perfectly with its neighbors, fitting together so tightly that a knife blade cannot be inserted between them. Yet they used no mortar. This was the genius of the system. When an earthquake strikes, the ground does not shake uniformly. a rigid, mortared wall will crack and crumble as these conflicting forces tear it apart. But an Inca wall is a dynamic, breathing entity. The precisely cut stones are free to shift and slide against one another, dissipating the seismic energy through friction and movement. Once the trembling stops, gravity simply pulls the interlocking blocks back into their original positions. Modern engineers have a term for this: dynamic isolation, and we spend millions to achieve a fraction of this effect with complex systems of ball bearings and rubber pads. The Spanish conquistadors who toppled the Inca Empire witnessed the resilience of these structures firsthand, yet they dismissed them. To European eyes, such precise stonework without mortar seemed primitive, even pagan. They preferred their own architectural styles, building churches and palaces with thick, mortared walls that looked imposing but were fundamentally brittle. They did not ask why the old Inca walls still stood after a tremor while their new constructions lay in ruins. This was not just a failure of observation, but an act of profound cultural arrogance. The knowledge of how to shape these stones, the precise angles, and the understanding of seismic dynamics was held by a specialized class of Inca stonemasons. As their society was dismantled, that knowledge was not recorded in a language the conquerors could understand. It was simply lost. The cost of this loss was measured in human lives during the countless earthquakes that have shaken the region over the centuries. Today, engineers study these ancient sites with a sense of awe, realizing that the blueprint for some of the world's most resilient architecture has been here all along, waiting for us to rediscover its wisdom. This mastery over the physical world finds a parallel in an ancient mastery over the mind, a psychological practice designed to weather the inner tremors of fear and distraction. The mind itself was an ancient workshop, a space for crafting resilience and clarity. Long before modern psychology, the sages of India were conducting intricate experiments in the laboratory of human consciousness. Their findings, meticulously detailed in texts like Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, were not vague spiritual advice but precise, systematic instructions for mastering attention. These were not passive states of relaxation, but active technologies for training the brain. Practitioners learned to steady their focus on a single point, to observe the chaotic flow of thoughts without being swept away by them, and to cultivate emotional stability in the face of life's inevitable turmoil. This was a science of the inner world, a toolkit for well-being that was as sophisticated as any external invention. The survival of this knowledge depended on the great monastic universities like Nalanda, where generations of masters and students preserved the oral and written traditions. But these centers of learning became gleaming targets for invaders. Waves of conquest from Central Asia and later European colonizers systematically dismantled these institutions, burning their vast libraries and scattering their scholars. The intricate, multi-layered practices were often diluted into simpler forms to survive, or their deepest meanings were lost entirely as the chain of direct transmission was broken. Modern neuroscience using functional MRI scans now confirms what these ancient practitioners knew. Meditation physically strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the brain's center for rational decision-making, and calms the amygdala, our primal fear center. We are only now, scientifically, catching up to the profound psychological benefits they had mapped centuries ago. The suppression of these mental technologies had a profound cost, delaying for the wider world the understanding that mental fitness is as critical as physical health, and that our inner state is something we can actively engineer. Just as these traditions sought to bring order to the human mind, another civilization created a device to bring perfect order to human time, a clock that synchronized an entire society with the heavens themselves. A tiny boat would float across a water clock's surface, marking each passing hour with a chime and the movement of automated musicians. In the workshops of the Islamic Golden Age, engineers like Al-Jazari were not merely building timepieces, they were creating mechanical theaters. His elephant clock was a masterpiece of global engineering, using water power to move an elephant driver, a phoenix, and serpents in a complex, synchronized performance that celebrated cultures from Greece to India. These were not isolated curiosities, but part of a thriving tradition of automata that could serve wine, play flutes, and even wash hands without human intervention. Al-Jazari's Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices detailed these creations with such precision that modern engineers can build working replicas, proving they were functional marvels, not just fanciful ideas. This fusion of art and science represented a peak of mechanical innovation, a clear precursor to the programmable machines we know today. The survival of this knowledge, however, was tethered to the stability of the empires that funded it. When the Mongol armies sacked Baghdad in 1258, they threw the vast libraries of the Abbasid Caliphate into the Tigris River, their inks bleeding into the water until it ran black. The Caliphate's intricate network of patronage collapsed, and the workshops that produced these wonders were dismantled. The engineers, their craft no longer valued, saw their knowledge fade into obscurity. The principles behind these automata, from gear trains to programmable cams, had to be painstakingly rediscovered centuries later during the European Renaissance, a delay that represents a profound hiatus in the history of robotics. With this final lost marvel, our journey through 22 erased inventions comes to a close. Yet, the pattern behind their disappearance is what truly demands our attention. In every case, from Rome to the Indus Valley, the loss was not a simple accident of time. It was the direct result of conquest, whether through violent library burnings, the deliberate execution of innovators, or the slow, silent death of a craft when its cultural and economic support system was torn apart. The common thread is the fragility of knowledge itself. It cannot survive when the people who hold it are silenced, when the schools that teach it are destroyed, and when the new rulers have no use for the wisdom of the old. What does this mean for us today, in an age where our own knowledge is stored in fragile digital clouds and vulnerable to new forms of erasure? The story of these 22 lost inventions is more than a catalogue of what could have been. It is a stark and urgent lesson in the perpetual need to protect the diverse and fragile threads of human genius. The recurring destruction of self-healing concrete, flexible glass, and advanced agriculture was not random chaos. It reveals a deliberate blueprint for control. Conquerors consistently targeted innovations that threatened their economic power, like the glass that could devalue imperial gold, or the self-sufficient Chinampas that made a population resilient against siege. They dismantled the very institutions that generated and preserved this knowledge, burning the libraries of Alexandria and Baghdad, shattering the guilds of Damascus Steel smiths, and toppling the monastic universities of India. Each act of erasure was a strategic move to eliminate cultural competition, ensuring the victor's narrative and technology became the only version of reality. The loss was not a side effect of war, it was the point of it. This pattern of knowledge suppression echoes in our modern world, not with the smoke of burning scrolls, but with the silent decay of digital data and the gentle pressure of cultural homogenization. The fragile clay tablets of the past have their parallel in our fragile cloud storage, vulnerable to server crashes, corporate failures, or deliberate censorship. When a single global platform decides which languages are supported or which histories are amplified, we risk a new, quiet form of conquest, one that could deprive future generations of the diverse ideas we need to solve tomorrow's crises. The lesson from these 22 lost marvels is urgent and clear. Human progress is not a straight line, but a fragile web of ideas, and its survival depends on our conscious effort to protect it. We must become the librarians the ancients lacked, actively preserving the world's knowledge in all its varied forms, from digital archives to endangered languages and traditional crafts. The next great invention, the one that could solve a crisis we cannot yet foresee, might not be in a laboratory. It could be resting in a forgotten text, an elder's memory, or a cultural practice on the brink of vanishing. Our responsibility is to ensure it is not erased again. Our journey through 22 erased inventions reveals a profound truth, that human history is not just a record of what we built, but a graveyard of what was destroyed. Each lost marvel, from self-healing concrete to Mayan mathematics, represents more than a setback. It is a detour on the path of progress that cost us centuries. Imagine a world where flexible glass made buildings safer, where Roman concrete created self-repairing infrastructure, and where advanced probiotics and anesthetics eliminated millennia of human suffering. This was not our world, because Conquest systematically dismantled the very frameworks that made such innovations possible. The true cost is measured not in forgotten objects, but in the delayed dawn of entire fields of science, medicine, and sustainability. These stories force us to see history not as a single, triumphant march, but as a mosaic of countless threads, many of which were violently cut short. As you reflect on these echoes from the past, a crucial question arises. How do we, in our own time, become guardians against a new era of intellectual erasure? The answer lies in active preservation. We can support global education that values diverse forms of knowledge, from indigenous ecological wisdom to endangered languages. We can champion the digital archiving of humanity's collective genius, ensuring that no single point of failure can wipe out our libraries again. And we must continually question the dominant narratives, seeking out the silenced voices and the suppressed ideas that might hold the key to our future challenges. The next great invention that solves a crisis like climate change or a pandemic may not be born in a modern lab, but rediscovered in an ancient text or a cultural practice we wisely chose to protect. We now pass the question to you. Which of these lost inventions do you believe would have most profoundly reshaped our present? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this exploration into history's hidden chapters has resonated with you, subscribe for more journeys into the forgotten. Let's work together to ensure that the brilliant, fragile light of human ingenuity is never extinguished again.